Now, state schools, there are mainly two types of state schools. You've got comprehensives, which are your regular school. It's similar to your regular government-aided schools in Hong Kong. These schools in the UK can be called local authority maintained schools, they can be academies, faith schools, or free schools. Now, I'll generalize it a little bit. This is a common application form process. So you have to apply through your local authority. So if you live in, for example, Jordan in Hong Kong, you would apply to schools only in Jordan. If you live in the UK, for example, and you live in Surrey, then you apply for schools specifically in that council within Surrey. So the UK is very large. You have to be very specific about which schools you pick. It's a very small area. Now, comprehensives include primary schools, secondary schools, and sixth form college. It's completely free, and this is the option that most students take. 93% of students in the UK take this option, so it is very normal to go to a comprehensive. So we have grammar schools. Now, this is what you would be calling your Band 1 or your government-aided schools in Hong Kong, the very top state schools available. Like Mark said, there are only 163 in England and 69 in Northern Ireland. So if you live in an area that doesn't have one, you don't really have the option of getting into a grammar school. They are very academically selective and very competitive, and they're only available at secondary. So there's no primary school grammar school. Okay, there's only secondary and sixth form. Again, you apply for entry at 11 and 16, just before secondary school at the beginning and at the beginning of your A-levels. Entry exams, 11 plus, mainly covers English, maths, verbal reasoning, and non-verbal reasoning. So Mark talked about verbal reasoning before. This is an example of what you might get in a non-verbal reasoning test. It's not something you'd commonly take in Hong Kong, so it's something that your child would really have to prepare for. There are lots of papers that you can take, test mainly on your spatial awareness. No, again, grammar schools. If a school has grammar in the name, it's not technically a grammar school. So do check ahead and make sure that it's not an independent school that you're applying to. Hello, are you all eligible? So according to the UK government, after the 31st of January, every BNO holder who are looking to move to the UK with a child under the age of 18 will be eligible to go to a state-funded school. Now, that means you need to have proof of address. You need to be living in the area. When you apply to state school, you'll need to prove that you are living in that county or that council area, okay? That means that you might want to have a council tax bill or something similar.
A small number do. I wouldn't say it was common, but it's probably increasing.
Mm-hmm.
But usually only at GCSE level.
Yeah, and do you think that's something that might increase more with the BNO changes?
It's possible, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
So liberal studies is a kind of a combination of all the things you'd have in other subjects in the UK. So in the UK, you have other subjects that compensate for liberal studies. So in primary school, liberal studies kind of substitutes science and substitutes kind of geography. In the UK, geography and science, there are kind of standalone subjects. You also have things like PSHE, which covers some of the things that you might talk about in liberal studies. There are also religious studies, which talks about religion, different faiths and things like that. So in the UK, you do have what you'd call liberal studies, but they are just spanning across many different subjects. So you might even come across some of it in English or some of it in science. It's not a standalone subject because that kind of liberal kind of thinking is in all the subjects. Mm-hmm. So you won't really miss anything if you go to the UK. What you will miss is things like Mandarin or Cantonese, so anything like that language-based. So Mark did say that schools don't add extra qualifications, but he did mention that they'd be willing to take students taking an extra exam. So some of the things that schools do offer would be things like taking Mandarin GCSE or Chinese GCSE. So if your child goes over to UK and they would still like to take a GCSE in Chinese, sometimes schools do offer that, but it really depends on the school. They might not offer extra classes, it depends on the school again, but some of them would be willing to let you take that as an exam. So if you do want to do that, it's a possibility. I think it's very, very uncommon because as Mark mentioned, state schools are usually for local students. So you'll find that everyone already has a very strong level of English. If, for example, there is one or two children or child that go to a state school and their English is very weak, usually the school does have an extra support, like an extra teaching assistant or someone to help them. But if you're, for example, coming from Hong Kong and you're very grammar focused, you'll find that when you go to a state school in the UK, that kind of the teaching, the extra second language support won't be similar to what you get or what you're expecting. So it doesn't quite meet your needs, but there is always support there for some in some schools. But again, it depends on the school. But again, it's very uncommon to have very weak students in there. I did observe when I was in school that there was one student who was from Hong Kong and just really struggled because they joined quite late. They joined around in year 8 or year 9, and they didn't quite fit in because their English was very weak and they were surrounded by everyone else that was speaking very native, very local English. So this is something to consider if you think of sending your child to state school. If you're not planning well ahead, if your child gets into one of these schools that are very local, have mixed abilities, very large class sizes, or even sometimes behavior problems in these schools, your child will find it very difficult to settle in. So it's very important to do lots of research and pick a school that does have a lot of support. It's something that will kind of hinder their learning in other subjects. So do plan ahead and think about it carefully.